There's a real stigma that once you come into hospice, that's an admission that you're dying. And oftentimes, people are trying to avoid it or don't want to discuss it.
My personal professional mission is to change the way we die in this community, and to change the way we die by making it known that dying in the context of having time and being able to say goodbye and being able to do the things someone wants to do to put closure on things is that beautiful process.
For me, I think I would explain hospice as helping a patient and a family who's been diagnosed with a terminal illness, once they've decided to no longer seek curative treatment, helping them through that end-of-life journey, whatever that entails.
It's holistic. We just don't look at medicines and equipment, but we also look at the patient as a whole, try to involve their faith community or spiritual community, whatever it is, and realize that death is part of a transition, it's part of life, and that it doesn't have to be something shrouded or kept in the dark or be fearful of. It can be something that's actually very freeing for families and patients.
My wife and I were married for 45 years. And so, we spent a lot of our lives together. That's a big chunk of our lives. We were together 47. She got ill in 2008. And so I became her full-time caretaker at that time. But of course, she took care of me for 45 years before that, so now it was my turn to be able to give back. She reached a point where I could no longer take care of her all by myself. The doctors at this point told her there's really nothing more we can do for her. Medicine's pretty much done with her. I didn't want her to suffer through the indignity of institutional care, if I could help it. And so we came up here and found that it was a home-like setting, like a living room, but with the nurse's station right outside the door. Traditional medicine has very strict limits on what you can do and what you can't do and how much you can do it. In a hospice setting, those limits are removed, and you can do whatever is needed to make the patient comfortable. There's a big screen TV in the room, and sometimes I would bring in some of her favorite movies and then go out and get her one of her favorite meals. And so even though she couldn't move, we could sort of have dinner and a movie right inside her room. We were always worried, would she be in a lot of pain? Would she be uncomfortable? How was she going to feel as it got closer? How are we going to be able to handle that? And they made her very comfortable. And whatever she needed in a hospice setting, that you don't have those restrictions and limitations like you do in traditional medicine. So whatever she needed, they could do. And when the time came, she was able to say goodbye the way she wanted to.
Dying is a very emotional and spiritual journey, and many times our physical symptoms are exasperated by our spiritual and emotional side. And so without having a team that's working to manage the physical symptoms as well as the emotional and spiritual symptoms, the patient's journey wouldn't be as complete, number one. But the team really recognizes we're not here to treat just you, because you're only a part of that journey. We have to treat your whole family. We have to treat your children, your spouse, your significant other, your friends that are near you. They're all part of your life, and if you're going to have a peaceful ending, they have to have a peaceful journey with you, and they have to be able to come to resolve with that.
A lot of times we'll have patients come in very scared, they don't know what's going to happen. We do a lot of education and talking about this is the process, these are some of the things you might see or feel, and I just think that's the best way for a patient to pass, and families to be aware of those things that are going to happen.
A person worries about gasping for air, and they want to know that there's medication available to help them be comfortable at end of life. A person might be worried that their loved ones aren't going to be well supported after they pass. And we follow people for a year for bereavement support after the patient dies. So that is a huge benefit.
And hospice, it's a visitation work. It's getting together with people, it's finding out their life stories, it's finding out how they're uniquely facing the current situation that they may be in. Some of them know they're dying, some of them don't want to know or admit they're dying, and joining them on that journey and helping them in whatever ways they want to be helped.
My father was a park manager in the state of Wisconsin, so my earliest memories are of living on an island, Renee Island, which was a state park, still is. We'd walk out the back door and down a hiking trail, and soon we'd be in the campground where our little friends would come year after year, and we would swim, and we'd make all these encampments on the beach. We'd go fishing, and it was a lovely way to grow up because we had many different friends from different places. I was 10 years old when Jack Kennedy became president, and that had a big effect on me. It fueled my optimism and my idealism. When he was killed in 1963, I became very politicized by that. And then all of the other assassinations happened. Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Bobby Kennedy. I mean, that all happened before I graduated from high school. You know, these strong leaders who were looking for peaceful solutions to serious problems. And of course, the Vietnam War came along then, and many of my friends were having to make life or death decisions about whether they would go to war, whether they were conscientious objectors. And these were people who were 17 and 18 years old. So in my college days, I became very active in anti-war activities, and we had teach-ins back then. We wanted our fellow students and faculty to understand why are we going to war? What is this for? What is the purpose of this? How is it making the world better? Should we be there? And that stayed with me for a long time. I ended up choosing several colleges, but ended up at the University of New Hampshire in Durham, which turned out to be a place I wanted to live on the Atlantic coast by the ocean for a long, long time. Little by little, I ran out of money for graduate school and started working there as well, and then got an opportunity to apply for a job as the community coordinator for the Sea Grant and Marine Studies program, Marine and Ocean Engineering. I guess they had about 6 candidates, and we all got the same letter saying, well, we didn't find anyone with just the right mix of talents and skills and experience, so we're going to not hire anyone at this time and reopen the search. So I thought, I'm going to go talk to that guy that interviewed me and see. He wanted a newsletter. So I said, I know you want to do a newsletter. Maybe while you're searching for your final candidate, I could do that for you on a freelance basis. And then maybe you might find out if I do have the skills and temperament that you're looking for, and if so, you won't have to search anymore. And that's what happened. I did go and do that, and I ended up there for 4 years, writing all sorts of popular pieces for the public and for educators and others based on the marine science that was being done at the university, both by Sea Grant and others. The director at the California program saw some of the pieces that I'd done, and he said, we have some great technical reports, but we need to improve our popular literature. Would you consider coming out here and working for us? And I said, well, yeah, except that throughout my life, I had started to learn that life was getting harder and harder for me because I did not have the organizational skills that others did. I couldn't plan things. Everybody else seemed to be able to put together a plan, follow it, and you do this a couple of times and then it's routine. That didn't work for me. Every project was a new project. And then another friend of mine was pointing out that she thought our friendship wasn't that great because I could never do anything with her. I was always too busy at work. And often, when we did plan something, I would show up late. And she found an article in a magazine about ADD. And she sent it to me and said, "Is there any chance this sounds like you?" I read it and I said, this is exactly what my life has been like. I just realized the other day that because of that, I moved around the country, lived in some of the most beautiful places. I lived in Southern California. I spent time on the beaches. I did my job, but I had the lovely life outdoors. I went sailing. I learned how to sail on the Atlantic Ocean. I moved turns out, to Washington State and worked for another university there. And then I still ended up coming back here because I did a team and training thing. My work for Lawrence, when I came back to Lawrence the second time, was development work. I was working as a major gift officer. And so my territory was all of the West Coast, Colorado, and the greater Chicago area. So I was traveling by air to the West Coast at least twice a month, and then to Chicago at least twice or three times a month. And that began to get very wearing on and I couldn't breathe very well. So I did that from 2003 until 2005. And then I had to file for long-term disability and retire at 58. So I'd ask my pulmonologist, well, how am I going to know when it's the right time for me to go into palliative care? And he said, well, do you want to talk to a doctor? And I said, yeah, a consultant. So I went to see Dr. Swanson, and he explained it all to me, and I immediately started palliative care with him. But then when this came up, he said, would you like to try hospice? And I said, oh my gosh, I thought that meant that you were 6 months from dying. He said, no, it's quite a bit different now. The hospice experience has been absolutely wonderful. All I can say is everyone who has come into my home has been remarkable. They have treated me exactly the way they said they would. They don't tell me what I must do. They're here to give comfort and care and to share with me the tools they have to make my life easier. They do everything to get my medicines when I need them, and they bring me wine when I'm out of wine. And these people I consider them angels disguised as human beings. Hospice works best for patients and for their families or friends if we're all honest about death with each other. It is a part of life, and we shouldn't try to spare each other, because the best experience that comes out of hospice is talking with each other about these things so that we're able to say things to each other that we maybe wouldn't have a chance to otherwise. And I have learned so much. I have learned so much about me and have taken advantage of all of those significant influences in my life, plus hospice, which is one of the big ones, to make my life better. And what more can you ask? What more can you ask of life?
I was born in Appleton, Wisconsin, on the north side of town. When I was 5 years old, my dad bought 3 acres off of a 60-acre farm and had an old farmhouse on it. I had 4 brothers and 5 sisters. I was 28 years old. I said to my mother, I'm going to Green Bay. What are you going to do in Green Bay? I said, I'm going in the service. I checked the Navy one more time, they were filled up. I walked right over to the Air Force and signed up. Midnight, you took your IQ test. You wanted to see what you could do under stress. Well, some of the guys just put their head down the desk and fell asleep. They didn't even write nothing. But I wound up with 72 average. It was good enough to go to Officers Candidate School. So I took my training in Camp Grant, Illinois, which is at Rockford in the wintertime. I remember they took us out on, we started out with a 3-mile hike and we graduated to 25 miles. It was 10 below zero. They brought out food on a truck, big barrels of stew, and then they had these ice cream, strawberry, vanilla, and chocolate between some wax paper. Yeah. And the guys, they took that ice cream and threw it over in the field. The soup was in a big garbage can. It was warm, but by the time you got it ate, it froze in your mess kit because your mess kit was 10 below zero. You know. I bummed around for 4 years after I got out of the service and lived a life of rye, you know. And I met her on a blind date. My buddy said, I got a gal lined up for you, he said. So we kind of hit it off on the first time, and that's how I met Grace. I had 6 girls and 2 boys. I remember when I was a young lad, my uncle on my mother's side was married, but he didn't have any kids. So when we got up on Christmas morning, we had 1 present apiece. My uncle would come about mid-morning with a box full of toys. And one year I got a wind-up tray with a little track. Oh, I thought that was the nicest thing I ever got. I laid on the floor and I played with that tray until I fell asleep. I've been active all my life, doing something. And now, I'm ready to depart this world at any time that God feels like taking me.
From the day we're born, our bodies were created to end. And the beauty is that when the body can be allowed to do what it was created to do without unnecessary interventions, it does so perfectly and seamlessly and peacefully. That's what hospice can provide. It doesn't have to be tubes and bells and whistles. It can be in your own bed, surrounded by those that you love, and the body just slowly lets go. And it happens after they've had time to prepare and say their goodbyes, and it's peaceful.
I got to hold the hand of a man who died last week, and his sister-in-law was sitting on one side of the bed holding one hand, and I was holding on the other. The place he wanted to be was Key West, and we couldn't get him back to Key West. And so his sister-in-law was describing the sunrises and the sunsets and the beautiful color of the ocean at Key West as he took his last breath. And that was a real privilege. It was an honor to be there at that point, to support him, but to support her. So it's a privilege working in this field.